All right, so let's walk through the basic process of setting up an account on Expo Snack and just a real brief orientation to the lay of the land, the editor where you can find your files and so forth. Okay, so when you first click on the link to the Expo Snack site that I provided for you in the classroom stream, you get to a page like this, which at first can seem kind of intimidating, I know, because there's a bunch of code already written there. There's some template code. You got a file space already here, but the thing to remember is when you first go to the page, you're not logged in. This is just kind of the standard page that they give for everybody. So if you write code here, you're not going to be able to save it, or you won't be able to access it later. So we need to create an account for ourselves. So the first thing we do is we go here to the upper right where there is this kind of profile silhouette up here. I'm going to click on that, and you see that the option at this point, the only option is to log in. Okay, now we go here, even if you don't have an account, you go to the login. Because right underneath, right here, below the big black login button here, there's a link that says if you're new to Expo, which is going to be most of you, you're going to first create an account. Now, it turns out I already have an account, so it already kind of fills in my credentials. But if I didn't, I would click on sign up, and then you'd set up your account here. And then once you've set up your account, then you can go ahead and log in. Okay, so I'll log into my account. Takes me back to this code page. So it looks the same as what we got for the landing page, but the difference now is I am logged in. So you can see kind of my profile picture up here in the upper right. Okay, so now if I were to write some code and save it, then I'd be able to access it later on. If you're not logged in and you start writing code, when you leave that page, you're going to lose that. Okay, so first thing to do is make sure that you always sign in when you come to Expo Snap. Now, when you take a look at the editor here, it looks in some ways similar to REPL. You have three sections. You have the main section in the middle, the biggest section here, where the code is, of course. And then on the left here, this is your file space. So you can see that there's some folders already set up for you, and there's some files already there. And then on the right side here, this is what you'll see when you run your code. Okay, now let's talk about running the code, because we're designing specifically for mobile devices, which means phones and tablets. When we were designing a website on REPL, we could run the code directly in the browser, and we could see the results there on the right side of the REPL page. And that was sufficient enough for us. Now, when you're designing for a mobile device, however, the optimum scenario is that when you test it on a device. It is possible to test it in the browser, so you can see results in the browser like you do here. In this right-hand panel right here, this is where you see the preview of your code. So you can see there's already stuff there. It kind of gives you just a template. So this stuff on the right here is what you would get if you ran this template code here in the middle. Okay, so it is possible to preview it on the browser, but ideally, if you can, it's always best to try to actually preview it on a device, because it can be a whole different scenario, a whole different experience when you try to preview code on a device versus if you just look at it in the browser. Okay, now in this preview section, because there's two kinds of devices, basically. The situation we have now with mobile devices, as you know, there's two kinds. There's iOS, which are the Apple devices, your iPhones and iPads. And then there's Android, which are like your Samsungs. And those have a totally different operating system and totally different whole setup behind the scenes. Now, in the past, the way it worked in the past up to pretty recently was if you wanted to write some code for an app that you wanted to be able to distribute both to iOS and Android, and if you're a developer, that's a smart thing, because if you only did for one platform, then you're kind of leaving out half your potential customers. You'd have to write two different sets of code because you have two different programming languages. iOS uses something called Swift, and Android uses something called Java, and the two are not the same. So you can't just write, okay, I'll write some code here for my iPhone, and then I'll just carry it over to Android. In the past, that wasn't possible. You had to just write two completely different programs, each one from the ground up, in order to be able to have your app run on both, which is kind of a hassle. I mean, you can see where that's not very productive. So recently what's happened is that people have developed these platforms and programming languages that allow you to write for both. And that's what we're using here. We're using something called React Native, and that's kind of a dialect of JavaScript. And what that allows us to do is we can write just one set of code, and then we'll be able to run it on both iOS and Android, which is kind of the neat thing. Okay, but you see here in the preview section, if you look at the top here, there's some tabs here. And so if I wanted to preview it, say on an iOS device, okay, I could click here on this tab here, and I could see it on kind of like an emulator of an iPhone. If I wanted to see it on an Android device, I could click on the Android, and I could see it on an emulator for an Android. Okay, so you can actually preview your app on the two different platforms. Okay, now the thing about this though, these emulators that you have here when you preview your device is let me see what happens if I can show it here. Yeah, so if I tap to play, which is how you would run it, what happens is it doesn't actually run the code in the browser on your machine. It has to send it off to an offsite server, which will compile it and run it for you and then send it back. So you have to wait in line. There's a queue, as you can see, we're queue position 8 to run on the iPhone emulator. And so sometimes you gotta wait, and depending on how busy it is, you might have to wait a while. If you go with the paid version, there is a paid version of this IDE, this Expo Snack IDE, then you might get priority position in the queue. But if you're just a free user, then you might have to wait. And that's the same thing with the Android. If I go to the Android emulator and I try to run it, tap to play, run it on the emulator right in the browser, so I can see it right here. Again, you can see there's a queue, and the Android queue is longer. There's 14 people in the Android queue. Okay, so the way you can get around the queue, and that's kind of a hassle because, it's not going to be immediate now, we're down to 13, but it takes some time, and if you don't want to wait, one way you could do it is to pay for the free account, but the other way to do it is to run it on your device. So instead of running it on this so-called emulator, where you can see it right here in the browser, you can actually run it directly on your device, which is often a lot more convenient. Okay, so in the next video, I'm going to show you real quick how you can do that. You're going to have to install a small little app on your device, which will then take your code and you can run it immediately. Okay, but those are some of the options. You can see your device there. Okay, so if you want to run it on your device, you'll install what's called Expo Go, which is a small app that'll take the code and run it directly on your device. You can see it gives you a QR code, or you can sign in directly through your device, and then you'll be able to run your code there. Okay, and that's often the most convenient way to do it. You can, if you want to, you can use these emulators, but like you see, there's often a line, so you might have to wait, a few minutes or half an hour maybe for your code to actually run, which can kind of be a hassle. Okay, but that's kind of the basic layout of the land. Okay, now this this editor also, you got to make sure you save it. Unlike REPL kind of auto-saved it, so you didn't have to worry about saving your code. But this one you do. It doesn't auto-save. So you see there's a save button in black here, kind of in the row of icons up here to the right, top right. The save button, you got to make sure you save your code pretty frequently because it's not going to auto-save for you. So if you don't save it and you put in some code and then you close your browser, you're gonna have lost that code. So you've got to make sure you auto-save, you save your code. You get in the habit of saving your code because it doesn't auto-save.